So, as I was saying, though, Worcester versus Georgia is a very important court case that is essentially going to go against the state rights, or at least believe state rights of Georgia, and essentially say that the Cherokee Nation is its own sovereign nation. So, this is going to establish rules as far as the sovereignty and rules that Indians have over their own people in the civilized area that we've had in the East, in places like Georgia and Alabama and the southeast of our country. Samuel Worcester. He's the guy who is defending the Cherokee Nation's sovereignty. Okay, so it seems like the Native Americans will be protected, but as I just said, Andrew Jackson has had a long history of not liking the Native Americans, and so he's going to make it his duty to remove them through the Indian Removal Act. Not going to get much traction during his presidency, but his successor, Martin Van Buren, will. So we have the infamous 1838 to 1839 Trail of Tears, a very important date to remember. 15,000 Cherokees are forced on this 116-day journey. Other Native Americans to remember, it's really the five civilized tribes: the Creek, the Cherokee, the Chickasaw, the Choctaw, and the Seminole. And essentially, what the Trail of Tears it is going to enforce what Andrew Jackson had planned all along: the essential trade, of territory east of the Mississippi River that Native Americans had lived on and cultivated and lived on for generations. He is going to swap that territory with new Louisiana Purchase territory in places like Oklahoma and Louisiana and Kansas and places like that. So, not a fair deal at all. They are forced to move. 4,000 of these Native Americans die. You'll hear about the terrible journey, how they had to travel in the wintertime, the lack of supplies, just a terrible, terrible situation. And in fact, the only recompense that the Cherokee Nation got was in 1835. They actually got about $5 million from the U.S. government for territory that they were able to sell, and they went to court to sell that. So, terrible situation with Andrew Jackson and Martin Van Buren with the Native Americans. Okay, one of the people who is going to defend the Cherokee is Davy Crockett, of course, one of the heroes of the Alamo. Not the Alamo, but the hero of Texas Revolution. Excuse me. Nobody survived the Alamo. And so a couple of quotes from him: "I would sooner be honestly damned than hypocritically immortalized." His political career was destroyed because he did support the Cherokee. And again, he decided to just leave Washington, D.C., and he heads west to Texas. So he would then, excuse me for being incorrect, he would then be a hero of the Texans. Here's a couple maps of different routes of the Trail of Tears. As you see, places like Oklahoma, Arkansas, this is Louisiana Territory, being removed from already established lands and societies in the East. Okay. Some specifics. We have specific Indian leaders. Black Hawk. His land was given to Illinois after the War of 1812, so he's going to lead from Illinois and Wisconsin. He resisted eviction. He's going to fight back. He was crushed by some famous people, or soon to be famous people: Jefferson Davis, who becomes later the president of the Confederacy, and Abraham Lincoln, of course, the president of the Union. Okay. We mentioned the five civilized tribes, one of them being the Seminoles, focused in Florida. They have a long history of conflict with encroaching whites. As we talked about, Andrew Jackson, 1817, and through the 18, he's going to go into to Florida on sort of a rampage and become a folk hero, but also do a lot of terrible things to the local tribes. And these Seminoles are joined by runaway slaves, so there's other economic interest in Jackson's rampaging. This is 1817, 1818. We purchased Florida, of course, in 1819 with the Adams-Onis Treaty. The Seminoles have nowhere else to go. They're eventually moved away through the Trail of Tears as well. So we have this timeline: 1817, 18, Jackson going in; 1819, Florida's purchased; 1830, Jackson now has passed the Indian Removal Act, and of course we have the Trail of Tears, which is going to be from 1838 to 1839. So the Seminoles do not want to leave. They go into the Everglades to hide from these troops trying to evict them. There's a 7-year guerrilla war from 1835 to 1842. And in fact, there's another Seminole War even after this with any remaining Seminoles. It's called the Third Seminole War 1855 to 1858. Okay, it's one of the deadliest events during Jackson's tenure. 1,500 soldiers die. It's the costliest Indian conflict in the American experience. The leader of the Seminoles, Osceola, he was captured under a flag of truce. He was later beheaded, and about 4/5 of the Seminoles went and lived in current Oklahoma. Some still, very little, some still live in the Everglades today. Okay. So the next events we're going to talk about is building up to the Texas Revolution and eventual Texas annexation, the Mexican-American War, this part of history. So to do a little historical context, speaking of Mexico, Mexico is going to gain independence from Spain in 1821. And what Mexico is going to do, it's going to want to encourage settlement. It's just like the French. We talked about the French in early colonization. They have this vast swath of territory in New France. There aren't a whole lot of settlers there. So Mexico has the same sort of issue. They want to encourage settlement. They want to encourage not just Hispanics to move in this area, but also Americans as well. So Mexico sets up sort of a deal. They're going to allow people to come in and have these large tracts of land. And one of the people who's going to come in is a man by the name of Stephen F. Austin. He comes in and he gets this massive swath of land that was given to him by the Mexican government. Texas will actually be divided into 10 of these huge land tracts. And these are just ginormous land tracts. If you can imagine Texas being chopped up into 10 little sections. And the Mexican government has sort of a term for these leaders that are coming in. They're not Mexican citizens. They're not of Mexican ancestry, but people like Stephen F. Austin. They're called impresarios. And these impresarios are given the rights to settle in exchange for governing the area, maintaining the area, and recruiting others to come live, to use the resources and of course, give back to the Mexican government. So Austin takes this huge swath of land. And before he takes over, he makes an agreement with the Mexican government that all the people that come into Texas will eventually become Mexican citizens. They will become Catholic. They will follow all the laws that Mexico has, including no slavery. Right then and there, you should see that this is going to be a major, major problem, especially with settlers coming primarily from the existing South, where there is a lot of slaves. Okay. And he's supposed to bring in only 300 of these families to sort of settle and work in this territory. Okay. So, of course, you know where this is going. Stephen F. Austin ignores all these restrictions. Most of these people who come into Mexico Texas, have no desire to become Mexican citizens. Most are going to remain Americans at heart. During the same time period, again, I just mentioned 1821, 1823, John Quincy Adams offers to just buy Texas straight up from Mexico. Jackson also offers to buy Texas from Mexico. Both of these offers are refused, and Mexico is increasingly being settled by pro-slave and pro-American settlers. Okay, and by 1835, Texas Americans number in 30,000, just a massive amount of people. Okay, most are law-abiding. There's a lot of tough folks here. The image of the cowboy develops here, living off the land. And there's a lot of friction between the Mexican government because of this issue of slavery, because of also immigration. People are coming into Texas who are Protestant. They don't want to become Catholic. And Texas is not really promoting Mexican citizenship. So they're not being pushed to become Mexican citizen. So we have some issues here with Texans coming in and not abiding by the laws that were established when Stephen F. Austin came and helped settle Texas. Okay. So we have some conflict. Stephen F. Austin decides to go try to talk it out. So he goes to Mexico City in 1833 to negotiate these differences. And the dictator of Mexico captures him and throws him in jail for about 8 months. And in response to all these Texans sort of doing their own thing and not abiding, Santa Anna decides in 1835 to take away any sort of local rights and really try to lay the hammer down on these Texans. He raises an army to sort of suppress the Texans and get them back in line. And because of all this, Texans on March 2nd, 1836, declare their independence from Mexico. Okay. In July of 1835, so this is before they declared independence, Stephen F. Austin is eventually released. He comes back to Texas and sort of riles people up, and again, that leads to Texas declaring independence. Okay, they're by themselves. They're not part of the United States. They're not part of Texas. They're not part of Mexico. Excuse me. This is the origin of the Lone Star flag. Sam Houston becomes commander in chief, and the president of the Republic of Texas.